couple times now it's happened where the women will sit with me in an interview, and they're fine, or mostly fine, and then they'll see their videos and oh yeah, no, and their family, aunties, daughters, whatever, will see it and they'll say, "You're going to share this? You have to share this. This is fabulous." All of a sudden they have this kind of shift in how they're seeing themselves. So that's been potent.
And there's another thing too. That's not a mirror. When I see it on scale on the screen, I'm not seeing what I see in the mirror.
Right. It's a different perspective. It's
right.
perspective.
Right.
Yes. I am here with our Dr. Ruth. I am so excited to be able to share with you Ruth Miller. And this was sort of an impromptu interview and genuine cup of tea kind of visit. And so I'll be as surprised to see what happens today as you will. And so, Ruth, I couldn't possibly do you justice in an introduction. And so I'd really like if you just share a little bit about yourself. I know you've had a fabulous journey coming to this place today.
Oh my goodness, yes. I grew up in a very academic family, and all women, no men in the house, and that has all the implications you can imagine. And then we moved a little bit. I grade school in one place, high school in another, college in another, married a guy in the Navy, so I had a lot of experience around the planet. Then went back to grad school.
Right.
And went back to grad school because I kept encountering these issues, environmental issues first. And
right.
Then as I was dealing with the environmental issues, I realized that the underlying issues were social. I was looking for a way to understand it. And believe it or not, I found that in cybernetics. It's a term that was invented by a mathematician in the late 40s, after World War II. He had been one of the guys that tracks the aircraft as they come in. He'd be sitting there calculating where the gunner was going to have to aim, there we go, to catch the plane in flight. So the war's over. Norbert Wiener goes home, and he's got plants, and he loves his garden, and he loves his plants, and he's watching his plants do what he had been calculating to track the sun.
Okay.
And he realized there was a process here. There was something going on here that was not confined to the mathematics and the machines. And so he came up with the term cybernetics as the science of communication and control in humans and other living systems. So he's realizing this is a fundamental quality of living systems. Cells do it. Amoebas do it. You know, an amoeba will avoid toxins, or will go to avoid light, or go toward food. So it's happening at that level. And it turns out that cybernetics is the basis for the cruise control in your car, the thermostat in your house, the ways rocket ships make it to the moon. All of that is from cybernetics, and virtually every computer that was ever built is based on Norbert Wiener's theories of cybernetics.
Okay. So how do you go from a very definitely scientific background, and now you and I talked a little bit this morning, and you are reverend over 2 churches, is that correct? 2 church bodies that you are senior reverend for, and 3 nonprofit organizations that you're affiliated with. How did you go from such a kind of a hard science in a sense to so many spiritual matters, so many things focused on spirit in your life?
2 things. One was the family I grew up in included a very unusual woman, my grandmother, who had lived in India, had worked with Gandhi, and had seen remarkable things that we would call miracles. She was a very important influence in my life between about 8 and 12. The other piece, though, was completed the PhD, was director of a program, was on the board of the International Society, had 2 kids, had a husband, and then my husband's mother got sick. I didn't make it through all of that very well.
Right, House of Cards, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So the body gave out, and after I got mom well, literally, among other things, I burned out the adrenals, so there was no way to push through. I remembered some of the things that my grandmother told me about, and I remembered some of the things that I had read along the way, because I was always reading, I was always studying, and comparative religions, psychology, various healing methods. What happened was I kept getting guided into these places that were religious science and unity churches, and ended up coming up with a healing process that got me out of those symptoms.
We in our culture, and especially I see it in women, have a tendency to keep going and going and going until we're basically pushing through the pain until our bodies say, we're not doing that anymore. And it sounds like that's kind of where you were at that time.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so how long did it take you really to start to see yourself recovering from that?
Right. A good year and a half.
Yeah.
I kludged together.
Kludged together. I like that. Good word.
Some psychological therapies, a little bit of physical therapy, not much. The spiritual processes and practices in those traditions, as well as I had this huge insight. I came to understand that what we think about in the Christ process of the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, that the power for the resurrection came through the capacity to be totally forgiving in the middle of the crucifixion.
Can you elaborate on that?
When we are in a position where we could be blaming and angry and all of that at everybody else for the terrible things that we're doing, to not go there and to absolutely release it into somehow the greater good. And then I learned more about that later. He was able to allow that greater good to express itself in him. And so he could consciously declare his body dead and be done. And it is finished. 3 hours into a crucifixion process that's designed to last 3 days. And then, go on from there into the resurrection experience, which, looks as if you accept the Shroud of Turin. And one of the things that happened was, as I was coming out of that, one of the papers I'd written was being presented at a International Electrical and Electronics Engineers meeting, IEEE. And it happened, that was the meeting at which a whole team of engineers came in with a series of analyses of the Shroud of Turin.
Oh, wow. Now, see, there's
I love how the
alignment.
works.
This is alignment. Oh, my goodness.
So they basically said the only way that could have happened was a release of energy.
Right.
A release of energy. And there have been lots of other attempts to explain it, and nobody's ever explained it to my ability, and or my understanding, my willingness to accept those engineering reports. So a release of energy allows the body, to no longer be physical matter, but to be spiritual. Okay, the spirit body, if you will. So that all reinforced the work that I was doing. My inner work to heal the body, because I wasn't getting any external support for healing the body, and I got clearer and clearer that it was an inner process. So what I came to understand was that the body, and Carolyn Mace teaches this, and other people too, the body is our biology. Our biology is our biography, as she says, and our subconscious is stored in the body. All these memories are in different places in the body. And I was holding a lot of stuff. I was raised by a single mom who didn't want to be a mom, and I was the only kid. So a lot of stuff happened. And there were other issues in the process of growing up that happened that were all stored in my body because I was a nice, good girl and did all the things that I was supposed to do. So I learned that all the things that I had repressed were causing me to depress and be in depression, but also to have all these physical symptoms. So if I could push them out, and then release them in ritual, actually have them no longer be part of the body-mind system, that's where the system stuff began to be helpful.
In our bodies, then, we are carrying memories, impressions, a download, if you will, that we incorporated in our early life. Is there anything you would suggest, maybe to someone who hasn't gone in and delved into that? Where would someone start if they realize that, hey, I've got some stuff, I've got some old patterns, I've got some things I need to work through? Where should they start?
If I'm afraid, or I'm anxious, or I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm crying, or whatever, about anything, that's a button. And that button is tied to at least one and probably 8 or 10 stories. And those stories are all connected, and they've all gotten turned into a statement, a claim. So the claim might be, I'm not good enough, or the claim might be, the world isn't a safe place, or the claim might be that, no matter what I do, it's not ever going to come through, or whatever, any number of things. I've got one client I work with who, she has a story that she never got properly nourished as an infant, and she is always in deficit. And so every aspect of her life is about deficit.
Right. Sure.
So look first at the buttons. Second, look at the environment. Our physical environment, not just our bodies, but our physical environment and the people around us are showing us what we actually believe in. If I admire something in you, I have it in me. Okay. Also, if I'm upset about something in you, I have it in me.
Yes.
Huge clue.
Yes. And there is an enormous call to courage for a person who's willing to take the journey and see what those triggers are and those buttons are and those stories are.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And it'll all come tumbling back in if you don't immediately replace it with something stronger, firmer, higher. So the way I think of it is, if I dug all this stuff up, it's like dry sand. Now I need to pour some concrete in real fast. Otherwise, it's all going to come tumbling in. So the concrete is the highest claim I can make for that situation. I'm always in a mutually supportive relationship with anybody I'm with. Okay, that would be that highest claim. When the marriage that I was in was coming to an end, regardless of the form of our relationship, the love between us continues, and we lovingly co-parent our kids.
Yes.
That was the highest I could go, and that's what I held on to whenever things started to get weird. No, this is what it is. The love is continuing. We're lovingly co-parenting. So that claim was what filled the hole I had dug out when I started looking at the buildup and resentments and angers and stuff like that.
Right.
I know I've forgiven. I know I've released. I know I'm done with something when all that I experience is the love and the light. Then we're done. Then we're done.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the subject is, because wherever you start, as you open the heart, the true communication takes place.